Suddenly, he woke up from his sleep. As he opened his eyes, he noticed the sunlight seeping through the curtains. Beside him, Tina was still fast asleep. This struck him as odd because they usually woke up together. He glanced at his watch and saw that it was 6:30. Confused, he tried to remember their usual waking time, which was always exactly 8 o'clock. He couldn't recall a time when he woke up before 8 o'clock, not even once. It puzzled him further because everyone in the city seemed to wake up at precisely 8 o'clock every day. He quietly got out of bed, being careful not to disturb Tina, and walked to the window. Opening the curtains, he looked outside at the quiet city. There was no sign of movement. Realizing he needed to gather his thoughts and remember, he swiftly dressed and sat down in a chair. He remained there for an hour and a half, deep in thought. When Tina finally opened her eyes, she saw Dan. Dan, she said, slightly puzzled. Dan, what are you doing? Dan replied, I woke up early. The word early sounded strange to Tina, and she couldn't help but wonder why. Is something wrong, Dan? She asked. Dan assured her, no, nothing's wrong. I just wanted to get up, that's all. Tina got dressed, her face lighting up with a bright smile. It's time for breakfast, she said cheerfully. Tina insisted, come on, we mustn't be late. Dan was about to say something, but he held back. Instead, he stood up and agreed, yes, it's time for breakfast. You go down for breakfast, I'm not hungry today. I'll see you later. Tina looked at him, puzzled. We have to go to breakfast. Are you feeling ill? She asked, concerned. How about seeing the doctor? Dan didn't want to go to breakfast, nor did he want to see the doctor. Tina stood by the door, appearing annoyed. Tina, Dan said, I didn't eat anything yesterday or the day before, and I feel different. Tina moved closer to the phone, ready to call the doctor. Of course, you feel different, Dan. You are ill. I'll get the doctor, she said. Dan pleaded with her, please, don't call, Tina. I wanted to feel hungry. I haven't felt hungry for a long time. I wanted to remember the feeling. Tina looked worried and confused. I don't understand, she said. Nobody wants to feel hungry. That's just how it is. Nobody wants to feel hungry. No, nobody wants to feel unhappy. Nobody wants to feel anything, Dan continued. Yesterday and the day before, I didn't eat. Nobody noticed. I threw the food away. And now, I'm starting to remember things. I think there's something in the food, a drug. It's affecting our ability to remember things. Tina's face turned red as she spoke softly, crazy. Dan replied, maybe, but why can't we remember anything? What is this place? Tina slowly replied, it's our home. Dan questioned, when did we come here? Tina responded with uncertainty, I don't know, Dan. Is it important? Where were we before we came here? Frustrated, Dan shook her arm angrily, demanding answers. Why did we come here? Tina stammered, we? Oh, Dan, I can't remember. Trying to reassure her, Dan said, don't worry about it. Look, don't be silly. We're going to be very busy today. First, there's the pottery class, where you can finish making that bowl. Then we'll go swimming, followed by lunch. After that, we can relax in the swimming pool before playing tennis. Then comes dinner. Later, we can watch new videos in the video room, have a drink, and go to bed. We'll be exhausted by 8 o'clock. Tina agreed, oh yes, that's bedtime. We need 12 hours of sleep every night. Everybody says that. Dan turned to Tina once again, asking, Tina, how long have we been here? Tina replied with uncertainty, I don't know, Dan. We used to call this place our holiday. We used to call it our hotel room. Now we call it home, Dan explained. Tina seemed to struggle with remembering, saying, I don't remember that. That's stupid. Dan reassured her, no, it isn't, Tina. Dan then recalled the events of that morning when he woke up early. He suggested to Tina, perhaps you didn't wake up, Dan. Perhaps you had a dream, a strange dream. That's all. Dan insisted, but I did wake up, Tina. You saw me. I was sitting in that chair with all my clothes on. Tina responded, I'm not sure. Were you? I can't remember. She smiled at him and encouraged, come on, the sun's shining. It's another beautiful day. Let's go and have breakfast. She opened the door and Dan looked at her for a moment. You've forgotten our conversation, haven't you? Dan said. You've forgotten it already. Despite his remark, Dan followed her into the corridor. Dan gazed at the rows of doors on both sides of the corridor. They all looked the same. He walked alongside Tina until they reached the elevator. Tina pressed the button, and the doors opened. Morning, Tina. Morning, Dan greeted Russell, the sports organizer, who was already inside the elevator. He smiled and said, I hope you're both ready for the tennis match. We're playing at level 14. This afternoon, we'll be facing some skilled players. Tina laughed and began singing, Level 5, Level 5. Level 5 is really alive. It was their team song. As the elevator descended to the restaurant level, they joined the long line of people waiting for breakfast. Dan surveyed the surroundings and noticed that everyone was dressed in shorts and t-shirts, both men and women. He glanced down at his own t-shirt. Dan's light blue t-shirt matched the color of level 5. Even his shorts were light blue, indicating his level. Each level had its own designated color. The man standing in front of Dan wore a yellow t-shirt, representing level 9. Tina exclaimed with delight, oh, good. Cornflakes. I love cornflakes. Russell chimed in, so do I. Dan smiled, observing that every day, their breakfast consisted of cornflakes with thin milk. Tina always seemed content with it. Dan also noted that Tina appeared pleased with their lunches and dinners. Everyone around them seemed satisfied as well. As Dan thought about the food, he recalled that lunch usually consisted of soup and bread, while dinner typically involved soup and some variety of rice. They occasionally had a small portion of meat or fish, although not very often. Despite the limited variety, they were never hungry. Dan grabbed a tray and filled it with a bowl of cornflakes and a vitamin drink. Dan followed Tina and Russell as they made their way towards the tables in the restaurant. The restaurant boasted large windows that offered a view of the expansive swimming pool. On one side of the pool were families with children, while on their side, only people without children were present. Dan paused for a moment, deep in thought. He realized that none of them ever had children, and the youngest children on the other side were around 10 or 11 years old. He recollected a time when there used to be younger children and even babies. The realization struck him that no children were born in this place. The youngest ones he could see were already 10 or 11 years old. Dan waited, contemplating their situation. He placed his tray on an unoccupied table, finding it difficult to process his thoughts. Eventually, he pondered, so maybe that's how long we've been here, 10 or 11 years. He felt a sense of satisfaction with this conclusion. Quickly glancing around to ensure nobody was watching, he picked up his tray and hurriedly walked over to the waste disposal unit. He disposed of the food and drink. Casting another look around to confirm that nobody saw him, Dan proceeded towards Tina's table. As he walked, his thoughts raced. He realized there were no sick people in this place. If anyone fell ill, they would likely be taken to a hospital located somewhere else. No, nobody else leaves. Never, Dan thought to himself as he stopped and noticed Jack at a nearby table. Dan approached him and greeted, Jack, good morning. Jack responded cheerfully, "Good morning, Dan. Lovely day, isn't it?" Dan inquired about Jack's leg, asking if it was better. Jack looked surprised and replied, "My leg? There's nothing wrong with my leg." Dan persisted, trying to jog Jack's memory. "Don't you remember, Jack? You hurt your leg. You cut it by the swimming pool. I was with you. You fell on a bottle, and it broke, cutting you badly. They took you to the hospital, and you went in a helicopter." Jack stopped eating, his expression turning worried for a moment. Then, he burst into laughter and said, "I've never been to the hospital in my life. And I've never been in a helicopter. Is this a joke?" Dan looked down, noticing that Jack was wearing green level 11 shorts. He could see the long red scar on Jack's leg. Confused, he looked back at Jack, who was still smiling. Suddenly, Russell appeared behind Dan and addressed him. "Dan, are you all right?" Dan responded, "I was just talking to Jack about his leg. He cut his leg when we were at the swimming pool. Look, there's the scar. You remember, Russell? You carried him to the helicopter." Russell's smile faded, and he said, "Dan, can you come to my office after breakfast? I want to talk to you." Dan examined Russell's expression carefully before nodding in acknowledgement. Russell was the sports organizer for Level 5, one of many organizers in the building. The organizers resided on the highest level, Level 20. They were responsible for various activities such as sports, pottery, yoga, music, and more. When Russell expressed surprise at Dan's response, Dan quickly made his way out of the restaurant. He walked briskly towards the lifts and reached them. Pushing the button, the doors opened immediately, and Dan stepped inside. Russell hurried along the corridor towards him, but Dan managed to press a button and close the doors before Russell could catch up. Inside the lift, Dan looked at the buttons that indicated the 20 levels of the building. He pressed the button for level 20. Sunny Vista City was built on both sides of a deep valley. The swimming pools and sports areas were located at the bottom of the valley, while the rooms were situated against the sides of the valley. At each end of the valley were the offices for the organizers. The city extended for about 2 kilometers in length, and helicopters would fly in every day, landing on the roof of the 20th level. As the lift came to a stop, Dan walked out into an empty corridor. The rooms in this area were larger, with more space between the doors. Then, he heard a noise, catching his attention. The sound was a bell, signaling the opening of the next lift. Dan took a step back as Russell emerged from the lift. Dan addressed him, saying, "Russell, what are you doing? This is level 20. You shouldn't be here." Russell seemed concerned and insisted, "I must speak to you, Dan. It's important." Dan observed Russell looking at the wall next to the lift, where a red button was located. Russell began to move towards the button, but Dan stepped in between them. Dan asked, "Okay, is it done? Where should we talk?" Russell appeared worried, replying, We could go to my office. We can talk there." Dan paused, considering the situation. Russell was larger and stronger than him. Dan pondered the nature of sports in Sunny Vista City, realizing that nobody ever tried to win. This thought triggered a memory of his tennis match against Russell the day before, where Dan had actually tried to win. With a surprising smile, Dan suggested, "Come on, let's go to your office. I mustn't be late for the pottery class. I'm making a bowl, a soup bowl. Have you seen it?" Russell smiled in response and said, "No, I haven't." Together, Dan and Russell headed towards Russell's office, ready to continue their conversation. Dan stepped into the lift, followed by Russell. Russell turned to the row of buttons next to the door, muttering to himself about level 1. As his hand moved towards the button, Dan suddenly struck him hard on the back of his head. Russell fell to the floor, unconscious. Dan realized that he had knocked him out with a single blow. He wondered where he had learned such a violent act, as there were never fights or anger in Sunny Vista City. Looking at the buttons, Dan pressed the one for level 10. Since it was early in the morning, there was nobody on that level. He swiftly made his way through the door before it closed and hurried along the corridor. Spotting a set of stairs at the end, he ran up them. Upon reaching the top, he pushed open the door, finding it unlocked. Stepping through, he found himself on the roof of the building. Taking in the surroundings, Dan noticed a large helicopter stationed on the roof. He paused to look at it, and for a brief moment, he recalled that it was a Westing Type 23 helicopter. He tried to remember why he had such knowledge. It suddenly dawned on him that he used to work at a helicopter factory, specifically manufacturing Westing helicopters. Memories of his past occupation flooded his mind, but he couldn't recall when or why he had stopped working there or how he ended up in sunny Vista City. Dan walked across the wide expanse of the roof, deep in thought, as he contemplated his fragmented memories and the mysteries surrounding his current circumstances. Dan walked to the edge of the roof and peered over the wall, gazing at sunny Vista City. Afterward, he crossed to the other side of the roof and looked over that wall as well. He couldn't help but shake his head in confusion. On the other side, he saw another valley with identical buildings, resembling sunny Vista City in every way. There was a door on the opposite side with a sign on it, and Dan tried to recall its meaning. It was written in French and meant exit. He wondered when he had learned French. Feeling a sense of urgency, Dan quickly made his way to the helicopter. The door was open, and he discovered several empty boxes inside. Climbing in, he hid behind the boxes, examining their labels. One box indicated Sunny Vista City, another Club de Soleil, and a third Playa del Sol. Each box had written in different languages: English, French, Spanish, German, Italian, and even Portuguese. Dan sat there for approximately 10 minutes, lost in thought. Suddenly, he heard voices, and the door to the helicopter closed. Two men entered the front of the aircraft. Dan strained to listen to their conversation. "Well, that's it. We've delivered everything to the English and French sections," one man said. "Yes, now we can focus on the German and Italian sections," the other man replied. Dan's curiosity grew, wondering what they were delivering and why different sections were designated by language. He decided to continue eavesdropping to gather more information. Inside the small, untidy office, Travis gestured for Dan to take a seat. The room was cluttered with papers, maps, and various documents scattered across the desk. Dan looked around, taking in the surroundings. "Sorry about the mess," Travis said, noticing Dan's gaze. "Things have been quite hectic lately." Dan nodded and sat down, his curiosity mounting. He couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity in Travis's presence, as if they had crossed paths before. Travis leaned against the desk, his expression serious. "So, you've come from Sunny Vista City. Tell me, what do you remember?" Dan took a deep breath. "Bits and pieces, fragments of memories. I remember living in Sunny Vista City, the levels, the routine. But there are gaps, missing pieces that I can't quite recall." Travis nodded knowingly. "It's not uncommon. Many who arrive here from Sunny Vista City experience the same phenomenon. Memories resurfacing, a sense of something more beyond those walls." "What is this place?" Dan asked, his voice filled with both curiosity and a tinge of apprehension. Travis leaned forward, his eyes locked with Dan's. "Welcome to the valleys, the forgotten world beyond Sunny Vista City. It's where those who have sought to break free from the confines of the city find themselves." Dan's eyes widened. "Break free? But why? What's outside Sunny Vista City?" Travis sighed, his gaze distant. "The valleys are vast, untouched lands. There are towns, cities, nature, and a world beyond the controlled environment of Sunny Vista City. People who seek adventure, freedom, and a life beyond the predetermined routines choose to escape. Some remember their true selves and the lives they left behind. Others, like you, slowly awaken to the possibility of more." Dan absorbed the information, a mix of excitement and uncertainty coursing through him. "What now? What do I do?" Travis smiled reassuringly. "You're not alone in this. There's a community here, people who have broken free and created a life outside Sunny Vista City. We can help you rediscover who you truly are and navigate this new world. But first, we need to understand your memories, your past. Dan nodded, feeling a sense of hope. He had taken a leap of faith, and now he would embark on a journey of rediscovery in the valleys, away from the controlled confines of Sunny Vista City. Travis listened attentively as Dan explained what had transpired with Russell. He nodded understandingly. I see. Russell is from Sunny Vista City as well. He's part of the system, just like you were. But you chose to break free, and that's your right, Travis said, his tone comforting. Dan sighed with relief. I didn't want to cause harm. I just needed to find answers, to remember who I am. Travis leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. It's a journey many of us have taken. Rediscovering our true selves, reclaiming our identities beyond the controlled life in Sunny Vista City. It can be overwhelming, but you're not alone. Dan looked up, his eyes meeting Travis's. What's next? How do I navigate this new world? Travis smiled warmly. First, we'll help you regain your memories, piece by piece. There are resources, support, and fellow residents of the valleys who have experienced similar awakenings. You'll find a community here, a place to belong. Dan felt a glimmer of hope ignited within him. I'm ready. I want to uncover my true self and embrace this new chapter of my life. Travis nodded, his eyes filled with reassurance. You've made a courageous choice, Dan. We'll support you every step of the way. But remember, the journey to self-discovery is a personal one. Take your time, be open to the possibilities, and trust yourself. As Dan contemplated the path that lay ahead, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and a determination to embrace the unknown. The valleys offered freedom, growth, and the opportunity to define his own destiny. With Travis and the supportive community by his side, Dan was ready to embark on the adventure of a lifetime. The governments were struggling to address the widespread unemployment and social unrest. In the midst of this crisis, Sunny Vista City was established as a solution, an experiment in creating a controlled, self-sustaining community. Its purpose was to provide a safe and stable environment for those who chose to participate. In Sunny Vista City, everything was planned and provided for, Travis explained. Basic needs, such as food, shelter, and healthcare, were guaranteed. People were assigned jobs based on their skills, and resources were distributed fairly. The goal was to eliminate the hardships caused by unemployment and societal unrest. Dan listened intently, trying to absorb the information. So, it was like a utopia. A place where people could live without worry. In a way, yes, Travis replied. Sunny Vista City aimed to create a harmonious and controlled society. But over time, some began to question the restrictions and lack of personal freedom. It led to individuals like you, seeking to remember their past and rediscover their true selves. Dan's thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of it all. And now I'm here, in the valleys. What happens next? Travis leaned forward, his expression earnest. Next, we'll support your journey of self-discovery. You'll have the opportunity to reconnect with your past, explore your interests, and pursue a life of your choosing. It won't be easy, but you'll find a community of like-minded individuals who understand and are on a similar path. Dan felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The unknown lay before him, but he was determined to uncover the truth about his past and create a future filled with purpose and freedom. Thank you, Travis, Dan said, gratitude evident in his voice. I'm ready to embrace this new chapter, to remember and reclaim my identity. Travis smiled warmly. Welcome to the valleys, Dan. We are here to support you every step of the way. Travis nodded, acknowledging Dan's statement. Yes, you have a choice, Dan. We can administer the drug, and you'll wake up tomorrow in Sunny Vista City, without any memory of this conversation or your past. You'll continue living in the controlled and peaceful environment that the city offers. Dan hesitated, weighing his options. On one hand, returning to sunny Vista City meant a life of stability and security, where his immediate needs would be taken care of. On the other hand, there was a longing within him to uncover his true identity, to remember his past and embrace the challenges and uncertainties that came with it. "Is there another option?" Dan asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and curiosity. Travis smiled, understanding the inner conflict Dan was facing. "Yes, there is. You can choose to stay here in the valleys, outside of sunny Vista City. It's a place where memories are rediscovered, where individuals strive for personal growth and pursue their own paths. It's a more challenging and uncertain journey, but it offers the opportunity for self-discovery and freedom." Dan took a deep breath, contemplating his decision. He knew that choosing to stay in the valleys meant embracing the unknown, facing difficulties, and undergoing a process of self-reconstruction. However, the allure of reclaiming his memories and living a life of his own choosing was too powerful to ignore. "I choose to stay in the valleys," Dan said with determination. "I want to remember, to explore my past and shape my own future. I'm ready to face the challenges and forge my own path." Travis nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "Very well, Dan. We'll support you on this journey of self-discovery. Welcome to the valleys, where memories are reawakened and individuals find their true selves. Embrace the adventure that lies ahead." With a renewed sense of purpose, Dan embarked on his path in the valleys, ready to uncover his past and create a future filled with meaning and authenticity. Travis smiled back, acknowledging Dan's decision. "That's great, Dan. I'm glad you've made your choice. You're welcome to stay here in the valleys. It won't be an easy journey, but it'll be one of self-discovery and personal growth. We'll support you along the way." Dan felt a sense of relief and excitement, knowing that he had chosen a path that aligned with his desire for freedom and self-determination. He was ready to face the challenges and uncertainties that lay ahead, confident in his decision to explore his past and create his own future. Travis extended his hand, and Dan shook it firmly, sealing their agreement. "Welcome to the valleys, Dan. May your journey be filled with meaningful experiences and the rediscovery of your true self." As Dan embraced his new path, he embarked on a transformative adventure, leaving behind the controlled comfort of sunny Vista City and venturing into the vastness of the valleys. With determination and an open mind, he set out to uncover his memories, forge his own destiny, and embrace the freedom that awaited him.